Shabbat Shalom. I want to just share that some of you know that tonight I am going to be speaking about antisemitism. Some of these words may be hard for you. For those who are parents with children here, you can decide whether being in a different space might make sense. All these words are important to hear. This Shabbat, we are in a really good place. We're in a parsha that is the most peaceful in all the Torah. After surviving so much, in these closing chapters of the book of Exodus, we can look back on having been freed from Egypt, crossing the Red Sea, defeating the internal enemies of lack of water and the monotony of manna, defeating the external enemy of Amalek, standing at Sinai, basking in the unique transformative presence of God, receiving the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments. Then 40 days later, feeling the weakness and guilt of worshiping the golden calf, and finally, then coming into right relationship with God by building a Mishkan, a tabernacle with every single neighbor working side by side, each contributing their gifts and skills, completing it in the beauty of the wilderness outside of society, catching one's breath. This is as good as it gets. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek, be strong, and let us strengthen one another. We are unified. We are safe. Life doesn't give us enough of these moments. When we face dangers internally and externally, we tend to react based on our personalities, forged in personal and intergenerational experiences, and based on our values. I've spoken before about Rabbi Yossi Klein Halevi's distinction between Purim Jews and Pesach, Passover Jews. Purim Jews see the real threats around us. They draw our attention to the value of self-preservation. Passover Jews see the threats of not living our ideals. We were slaves in Egypt and therefore will not oppress the stranger and draw attention to the value of justice. The Purim Jew says to the Passover Jew, be not naive. The Passover Jew says to the Purim Jew, be not brutal. And of course, we are, or we ought to be, both kinds of Jews. Tonight, I want to make a different distinction, one that recognizes real threats that we Jews face based on the two holidays that have been added to our Jewish calendar that are not in the Torah. The holidays that celebrate the defeat of our enemies on Chanukah and on Purim. And this is not easy to talk about. The threats we face are really not easy. And the threats that we faced were different. But we are a week from Purim, and it feels necessary, if not timely. If you think about Chanukah and Purim, the threats that we faced were different. Dara Horn writes in her book called Reports from a Haunted Present, Reports from a Haunted Present, with the main title, hard to say, but she provides reasons for stating it. People love dead Jews. In that book, she writes, in the Purim version of antisemitism, exemplified by the Persian genocidal decrees in the book of Esther, the goal is stated openly and unambiguous: kill all the Jews. What are examples? Well, we all know them. Nazi Germany, before that, the Crusades, Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. But I want to provide immediately now a nechemta, a comforting thought. Think about the responses in our time in America to that outward kind of hate. In 2018, 3,000 people gathered here at Mount Zion after Tree of Life Synagogue shooting. 3,000 people. They were outside the windows. They were around the block. They were in every part of our building watching in different live streaming ways what was happening in the sanctuary. It was phenomenal. And included in that crowd was Representative Ilhan Omar. Many people who were standing by our side. When threats are overt and clear, good people will stand together with us in full support, as we will with them. Dara Horn continues, in the Chanukah version of anti-Semitism, whose appearances range from the Spanish Inquisition to the Soviet regime, the goal is still to eliminate Jewish civilization. But in the Chanukah version, the goal could theoretically be accomplished simply by destroying Jewish civilization, and this is hard to hear, I'll just say her words, while leaving the warm, de-Jewed bodies of its former practitioners intact. For this reason, the Chanukah version of anti-Semitism often employs Jews as its agents. It requires not dead Jews, but cool Jews, those willing to give up whatever specific aspect of Jewish civilization is currently uncool. She goes on to describe Jewish life under Stalinist Russia. The Nazis were open about what they were doing, but the Soviets pretended. They lured the Jews in, they baited them with support and recognition, they used them, they tricked them, and then they killed them. It was a trap. Chanukah anti-Semitism transformed, as it inevitably does, into Purim anti-Semitism. In the days of the Maccabees, it was cool to adopt Hellenistic traditions, to give up a circumcision, among other ways, to be acceptable in Greek life. But please let me be clear. I'm sharing Dara Horn's thoughts not prophetically, but historically, and as a way for us to talk about our present. And we need to have our eyes wide open. Last year, reported anti-Semitic incidents in the Twin Cities hit a high water mark of 97 incidents. And while most of them happened after October 7th, there were already 38 by October 6th. At another time, we can discuss what counts as an anti-Semitic incident. Regardless, the trend is going in the wrong direction. But to counter this, last May, the White House began a national campaign to combat anti-Semitism, a remarkable plan which has literally over 200 action items in every branch of government and others that are whole-of-society approaches. I love that phrase, whole-of-society approaches that get as specific as having a museum agency create curriculum about Jewish contributions to agriculture and having those displayed in rural communities. As a Jewish community, we ought to feel good about the support from the most powerful places in our country. But feeling good about these things, that's not our strong suit. That's the basic truth at the heart of Franklin Foer's gloomy Atlantic essay from last week. The golden age of American Jews is ending. His thesis, anti-Semitism on the right and on the left, threatens to bring to a close an unprecedented unprecedented period of safety and prosperity for Jewish Americans, and demolish the liberal order that they helped establish. Dara Horn's frame of Purim anti-Semitism from the right and Chanukah anti-Semitism from the left may be too clean a distinction to bring to Foer's analysis, but I believe it is worthy of consideration. What does one need to give up, that is the Chanukah version of anti-Semitism, to be acceptable today? Foer writes, "There's a number that haunts me. In 2022, the Tufts political scientist Eitan Hirsch conducted a comprehensive study of Jewish life on American college campuses, which surveyed both Jews and Gentiles. Hirsch found that on campuses with relatively high proportion of Jewish students, nearly 1 in 5 non-Jewish students said they wouldn't want to be friends with someone who supports the existence of Israel as a Jewish state. They were saying, in essence, that they couldn't be friends with the majority of Jews." At its heart, anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory. Yossi Klein Halevi writes again, "What anti-Semitism does is turn the Jews, the Jew, into the symbol of whatever is in that society given civilization's definition of its most loathsome qualities. And so, under Christianity, the Jew was the Christ killer. His blood be upon our heads, and upon our children," from Matthew. That's forever. Under communism, the Jew was the capitalist. Under Nazism, the Jew was the race polluter, the ultimate race polluter. Now we live in a different civilization where the most loathsome qualities are racism, colonialism, apartheid. And lo and behold, the greatest offender in the world today, with all the countries of the world, is the Jewish state. To me, it is beyond clear, and please hear me this, that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. But anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Plenty of Jews have not been Zionists for various reasons, and today, with the existence of an actual country where 7 million Jews live aside 2 million Arabs, we should be curious how someone speaks of Zionists and whether they are mapping onto that word tropes that sound curiously familiar about power, about alliances, about world dominance. There are some who are replacing the word Jew for Zionist to have their anti-Semitic focus on Israel seem acceptable. Most of you have heard me say plenty of times that critique of Israel is okay, and being critical of the government of Israel or its policies is as necessary as it is to be critical in America. This recognizes that most of us are not citizens of Israel, so it is done as part of a small people, Am Yisrael, who are implicated by what Israel does, whether we like it or not. What we say should be measured, and I believe come from our Jewish values and out of love for Am Yisrael, our Jewish people. And we know that when we do that, we will not all agree. That's not the point. It is okay, even if it is hard. It is also not easy for us to figure out how to respond to Chanukah anti-Semitism. I believe we need to resist calling things out as anti-Semitic and rather calling people into conversation. And even though Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the ADL, has publicly equated anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, which greatly confuses the public conversation, and I strongly disagree with it, I do appreciate his statement. I don't believe in cancel culture. I believe in counsel culture. This moment we are in requires more conversation, lots of conversation, and not being reactive. Certainly not the way that I get a weekly email called Anti-Semite of the Week. Drawing red lines everywhere does not help. On the other hand, we need to be curious whether societal pressure in some places, certainly not all, is making the giving up on Israel a ticket to acceptance. We welcome you as a Jew, but of course you don't support Israel, do you? That is historic Chanukah anti-Semitism. As we navigate these times, I have faith in us. It doesn't feel good being at the center of attention as we are at times, but we are a resilient people. We don't have to tolerate microaggressions, and certainly not actual aggressions, but we don't have to allow these acts to undo us either. We can put things into perspective. We can be on guard and also reflective and strong. It is true that we are not immune to history. There are cycles. There are reasons that this longest hatred of anti-Semitism persists. But we are not doomed to relive history. America still has institutions and ideas that are unique in the annals of history. And we have relationships that can make the difference in many situations. We need to maintain relationships and build new ones. Make distinctions between Purim and Chanukah anti-Semitism. Stand up with others against Purim anti-Semitism, and through conversations and creativity, hold Chanukah anti-Semitism at bay. And when we are weary, we can return to our Mishkan, our tabernacle, built with love as a refuge where our gifts are valued, where we are valued, where we know it is not all up to us, that we can pray for support to perfect this world under the sovereignty of God. Amen.